why have the taxpayers subsidize a franchise that not enough people are interested in? However, the flip side to it is that if a city wants major league status, wants to retain major league status, wants to build a new building in a downtown area and use the sports franchise, the hockey team, as the anchor tenant, there is a great opportunity for downtown economic revitalization.
At best, Mr. Bettman's arguments are not proven. The growing research indicates that he's wrong, and in fact, public investment occurs to the detriment of the overall economic and cultural growth of a city.
Bruce Kidd, hockey historian and author, questions the economics of keeping the NHL in Canada and at what cost to taxpayers.
I don't think there is any evidence that the overall economic benefit to the community is increased, and there is now a long list of studies to document that.
You have a first-class arena downtown which is built because you have a sports franchise as the anchor tenant. That means you've got shopping, you've got restaurants, you've got other forms of entertainment. It means you can attract the ice show, you can attract the circus, you can do a whole host of other things. And if a sports franchise gives a city an excuse to do that, that's wonderful.
The growing consensus among economists who've looked at this suggests that there's a detrimental effect to a huge public investment in commercial sport. It tends to lead to the low end of the service industry jobs. So you get a de-skilling of the workforce, and you get, at least in the level of employment, a much lower economic multiplier. You often get an increase in local taxes, which creates other bottlenecks in terms of developments. It may well be, and there are studies that suggest this, that cities are better off not investing in a sports franchise than investing.
Winnipeg's story is a reflection of a fan's worst fears that the NHL has grown too big for small markets.
We want to keep our team in Winnipeg, not in the United States of America.
The imminent death of a Canadian hockey franchise evokes arguments that range from the emotional to the rational to the irrational. Hockey has long been considered an important part of our cultural history, and to see it diminished in any way is bound to bring on a wave of sentiments both for and against. For some, the loss of the professional game means the loss of world-class status for the city. For others, it is a sense of lost community.
You'd like to think that Canada can sustain more than Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver, and that Edmonton and Calgary and Winnipeg and Ottawa and Quebec City can all stay. I don't know that they can, and if they can't, then that will be sad. Yet I can understand that, but I think everything should be done in everybody's power, whether it's the people of Winnipeg or Ottawa, Quebec City, wherever, and the National Hockey League, to ensure that if there's a franchise there now, to keep it there. And contrary to what a lot of people think, I'm convinced the National Hockey League under Bettman is trying to do that right now. I think they're trying to maintain the status quo in Canada while building on the base in the U.S. I don't think that they're building on the base in the U.S. at the expense of Canada.
It's not a country-by-country issue. It is really a market-by-market. Fans in their own market root for their own teams. If there aren't enough fans in a market to support a team, if there isn't the appropriate facilities for a team, then that market isn't going to have a team.
The Jets are a microcosm of the problems that small-market Canadian franchises face. The owners of the Jets have said they needed a new arena and accompanying revenues from luxury boxes and concessions to break even in the face of rising salaries. The Jets' payroll sat at $18 million, but was predicted that cost would rise to $30 million in the next few years. When you add to the mix the difference between the American and Canadian dollar exchange, the cost of doing business in this country makes owning a Canadian franchise all the more demanding.
Of a dollar that trades at 40 cents below the American dollar. And those are huge problems on top of having a small market.
That is a problem. It is a problem, and I think Bettman, Gary is very aware of that. And as a league, that came up a lot when we had these labor negotiations about how we have to try to make it more of a level playing field for, you know, our Canadian partners. And I think Gary, I'm not trying to put him on the spot, but I do think that he's going to try to construct some kind of a proposal for the league to look at.
One of the things we agreed to do in the course of the collective bargaining discussions that we internally agreed to do was take a look at the currency issue and see if there's something that we need to do. That's a fairly recent phenomenon because I think as recently as 2.5 years ago, it was 90 cents on the U.S. dollar for the Canadian currency, and we're going to have to watch it very carefully and see what, if anything, we can do about it.
With the overhead the way it is and to running a team, it is a very, very marginal business. I don't care whether you're in L.A., Pittsburgh, or Winnipeg. Now, Winnipeg's problems are made tougher. Again, I think you have a great point about the dollar, but it's tough all over.
I don't know what the answer is. I guess you know, when I played in Edmonton, it was about 20 cents on a dollar. I made Canadian dollars. And I guess the way to settle this, if you play in Canada, eventually you're going to find teams are going to pay Canadian dollars, and that's how they're going to be able to compete.
With the loss of a professional franchise, the community's emotional fabric strains at the seams. The damage assessment is hard to quantify. Some believe that it tears right down to the roots of the game.
One of the reasons that it would be silly of us to encourage franchise moves from Canada to the United States is I don't want to do anything to discourage the kids growing up in Canada to aspire to be NHL players. Not having as many franchises would have that very effect. And as I've said, since 2/3 of our players come from Canada, you don't want to do anything that diminishes the game's role as the national pastime of Canada.
Whether we can afford the small market franchises in Canada is a difficult question to answer unequivocally. However, one thing is certain. When we lose a hockey team, we most certainly lose a piece of the game that has come to represent something quintessentially Canadian. For some, it is also a loss of innocence. It is almost impossible now to watch a hockey game and not think of some aspect of the business of the game and how big that business has become. Winnipeg is a story of business in motion, moving from a small market opportunity to a bigger one, with loyalties and tradition trapped in the middle. We return to what many consider the roots of Canadian hockey when For the Love of the Game continues.
It's still the Canadian national sport. Canada is still the Bible belt of hockey, and it always will be. That will never change.
Go north of Winnipeg, and you leave behind a dispirited story of hockey in Canada to find one of hope and continuity. Foxwarren is a small town 30 kilometers east of the Saskatchewan-Manitoba border where hockey is everything. In the winter, hands are turned away from the fields of grain and all attention is given to the arena, a massive old wooden structure, cathedral-like. The Foxwarren Arena is physically different from other rinks that dot this land, but it shares a spirituality that all rinks have in common in Canada. For many years, a young man laced up his skates and did laps under the few rows of lights in the Foxwarren Arena until he found himself under the glare of the thousands of television lights in one of the newest rinks in the NHL.
Far back as I can remember, during the winter it's your life, and once hockey season was over, you couldn't wait for hockey school to start up in July and go there for a couple weeks and then hope, just kind of get through the rest of the summer until it starts up again.
This is the world of town hockey. They are not largely interested in the NHL. They are more engrossed in the goings-on in the local box scores and the rivalries that are only a car ride away.
I enjoy going into cities where hockey is talked about on the radio and talked about it at breakfast in the little restaurants, and driving through Canada in the summer when I go back there with my family. I enjoy stopping in the middle of Saskatchewan and people sit and talk about hockey. I love that.
It's a topic of conversation wherever you go. The first thing you talk about is generally hockey, and once you're done that, it's maybe the weather or something like that. But hockey's first on the list, and I think everybody follows it, and everybody loves the game. I think it's just part of the heritage.
Pat Falloon is Foxwarren's latest connection to the NHL. The product of countless hours of pickup hockey, some of it played in the most unlikely arenas.
The school where I went to school, junior high or up to the 8th grade was, about 100 yards from the rink. It's right beside the rink in Foxwarren, and they actually built a tennis court there, but I never had a game of tennis on it. We played hockey on that tennis court from, the first time the snow was melted until the end of the school year every day.